Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Studies Circle HISC Seerah session 218. So we're coming towards the end of the Seerah, and what we did last week, session 217, was the process of returning from the farewell pilgrimage. And so we said that he spent 3 days in Mina, the days of Tashriq, did Tawaf al-Wada, and then he made his final earthly journey, which was from Makkah to Medina. Before leaving, he allowed Aisha to go to Ta'neem to put on Umrah, and so she could do an Umrah, and that's where we get, that place is then where we get Masjid Aisha from, because they built a mosque there later on. And we talked about the conversation the Prophet ﷺ had with some of the entourage from Yemen who were critical of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And the Prophet ﷺ wanted to correct them for their mistakes. And he mentioned that they should be respecting Ali, because Ali was to him like Harun was to Musa, and that they are the Mawla, the helpers and supporters and protectors of each other. So that is a famous incident, and then there's not much recorded in terms of when the Prophet returns at the end of Dhul Hijjah, and then Muharram of the start of the 11th year of the Hijrah, and then Safar of the 11th year Hijrah, and then toward the end of Safar he sends out Usama bin Zayd as the general, he's only 16, 17, of an army that will be dispatched to Sham and fight the Romans and Byzantium rulers there. And the Prophet was criticized even then for that appointment, and the Prophet had to publicly announce to the people that he had every faith in Usama, just like he had every faith in Usama's father, Zayd bin Haritha. So that's where we got the army. He had just left Medina to go to the journey when they heard that the Prophet wasn't feeling well. So they just camped just outside a day or two march from Makkah, waiting to see if the Prophet would get better. So then, just talking about some of the sort of predictions of the end of time for the Prophet and obviously everyone in Medina loved the Prophet so much that they wouldn't sort of contemplate life without him. He is there when he's there, not on his campaigns and battles. You know, he is leading all of the 5 prayers all of the time. But the Prophet, we can see, gets some sort of inkling that the end is coming. So we've mentioned some of these before. So the Ramadhan of the 10th year, which we've just concluded, the Prophet, rather than doing ihtikaaf for 10 days, he did ihtikaaf for 20 days during the last Ramadan. And also, Jibreel would come every year to the Prophet during Ramadan, and they would recite the whole Qur'an as had been revealed up until that point. And the Prophet would go through with Jibreel the whole Qur'an. This year, Jibreel, came and recited the Qur'an twice with the Prophet. So again, there's some sort of indication potentially that this is something different and special now. So Jibreel went through the whole Qur'an, and that is essentially, that's the order we have the Qur'an now. Because obviously the Prophet, he mentioned that to the Sahabi, and he went through the order that he recited it with Jibreel, and made sure that everyone else was reciting it in that way. And obviously that is how we get the Mus'haf in that order at the moment. Then obviously the Prophet during the farewell pilgrimage, the title of the pilgrimage was Al-Wada, right? The farewell. So and the people at the time, before the Prophet passed away, would refer to it as the farewell pilgrimage. And again, it didn't sink in that this was actually the final pilgrimage. Because the Prophet, he said at the time during in one of the bayans, I don't know whether I will ever meet you at this place again after this current year. So again, there's that indication. Again, some people may have thought that he's just doing the Hajj the once and then he'll go back and rule from Medina and do other things, and he doesn't necessarily perform the Hajj again. So that might have been sort of some people's understanding of what the Prophet was saying at the time. And it's also reported that Allah revealed Surah An-Nasr in the days of Tashriq again, and we know before that Surah An-Nasr, is Nasrullah wal Fath, was revealed according to some reports after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. But then again, it said that it was resent during the days of Tashriq as the Prophet was completing the Hajj. So again, that's a very unusual occurrence, and obviously the Prophet would have thought, well, what is the meaning of resending a surah of the Qur'an that's already been sent? And again, it's the very very famous 110th surah of the Qur'an, when the victory of Allah has come and the conquest, and you see the people entering into the religion of Allah in multitudes, then exalt him with praise of your Lord and ask forgiveness of him. Indeed, he is ever accepting of repentance. And obviously, the reference is there to the conquest of Makkah, right? When the big conquest comes, and again, that's why the books of Seerah refer it after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, because this was predicting the conquest of Makkah, and then all of the people enter Islam. Then why shouldn't you start praising Allah and asking for forgiveness? Because Allah forgives; He is accepting of forgiveness. And it said that in the Khilafah of Umar ibn al-Khattab, they used to gather for halaqah, for study circles, and all the elders would gather in the company of Umar and some of the other elite. But amongst them, there will be Ibn Abbas, the son of Al-Abbas, and he was a youngster at the time. So he was probably sort of mid-teens or late teens, and he's in this gathering with all the senior Sahabi. And so all the senior Sahabi, they used to ask Umar, well, can we not bring our children? You let Ibn Abbas come. Can we not bring our children? You exclude us bringing our children. And so Umar, he recited Surah An-Nasr, and then he asked all of the seniors, well, what is your understanding from this? What is your understanding? And they all went through their different understandings and indications, or what do you infer from this surah? And when he came to Ibn Abbas and said, well, what does this surah mean to you? And Ibn Abbas, again, because it said that he had a really sharp understanding of the Qur'an, he said this is an indication to the Prophet that the end of time is about to come and that he should prepare to meet Allah. And then Umar said, yes, that is the understanding that we have as well. So again, it's looking at a very sort of a deeper understanding. And again, where Allah is basically saying, look, the end, right? You've done what you were supposed to do. And this surah gives that indication. But the implication of that is, well, the end of your end is about to come, so be prepared to meet Allah and spend your last time praising Allah and asking forgiveness of Him. So again, it said that Surah An-Nasr was revealed or re-revealed. And then again, if we look at the Qur'an, there are certain verses and indications within the Qur'an that sort of foretold this particular incident, not obviously the time and place, but it was trying to prepare the people. But the people, when they're reading it at the time, they don't read it with that in mind, because they have the Prophet ﷺ living and breathing amongst them. So they don't interpret, or the meaning doesn't sink in until later on. And again, every time we read the Qur'an now, or translations of the Qur'an now, we have different life experience. And so whenever I reread it, I get different things from it because I've matured a bit more, a few more things have happened in my life. So I read it with a different lens. I read it with a different, set of glasses, and I get different things from it. So obviously at the time when these verses were revealed, people didn't take it what it meant, but it hit home later on. So in Surah Al-Zumar, verse 30, Allah says, "You are going to die, as they will die. Then on the day of judgment, you will settle all your disputes before your Lord." Surah 39, verses 30 and 31. And that's directed specifically at the Prophet ﷺ, right? And we all know the story, and we'll get into it perhaps next week, inshallah, where the Prophet ﷺ dies, and then Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he recites the verse from the Qur'an, and Umar, he sort of says, "Where is this verse in the Qur'an? You're making this up." And then when he recites it, he suddenly collapses, and he didn't realize, and Umar said later on that it's as if I've never heard these verses before. So it's seeing things in a different light. And Surah Ali Imran, which was revealed after Uhud, it says in verse 144, "Muhammad is not but a messenger. Other messengers have passed on before him." So if he was to die or to be killed, would you turn your back on your heels? And he who turns back on his heels will never harm Allah, but Allah will reward the grateful. So here it's specifically foretelling the death of the Prophet ﷺ, right? And so what you're going to do in that situation, right? And obviously at the time there was a rumor going around that the Quraysh were, and it's a fog of war, that they were perpetuating that they've killed the Prophet, and that led to even greater disarray amongst the Muslims. And Allah is referring to that. Well, so what? Would you then forget everything? Would you be disheartened? Right? In Surah Al-Anbiya, chapter 21, verse 34, Allah says, "And we did not grant to any man before you eternity on earth. So if you die, would they be eternal?" So again, this is explicit. And it's a reference to the mortality of everybody, including the Prophet ﷺ. So again, there are verses in the Quran which explicitly mention that the Prophet ﷺ will pass away. So it's there to try and prepare people. And then we talked about a few weeks ago the hadith of Muadh ibn Jabal. So Muadh, he was appointed as a governor to go to the Yemen. And remember, he was poor, he lost his money, and the Prophet ﷺ appointed him as governor and to rule over the people. And Muadh and Abu Muwayhiba al-Ashri, they made a pact where they would sort of meet up every now and again. So as the Prophet ﷺ is sending Muadh to Yemen, and again, one of the famous discussions the Prophet ﷺ has, where, and again, this is one of the evidences that we use for ijtihad as a method to derive the hukm, the Sharia. Where the Prophet says, "Look, where will you govern from?" And Mu'adh says, "I will govern from the book and the Seerah, or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ." And the Prophet says, "Well, if you don't find it in the book or in the Seerah, what will you do?" And then he goes, "Well, I will use my ijtihad based upon these things." So again, the Prophet ﷺ, he approved that methodology. So that's a sort of a legal sort of digression. But as he's walking, and again, Mu'adh is sat on the camel or the donkey, and the Prophet ﷺ is walking alongside him. And he says to him, so Mu'adh says, "Look, you should be sitting up here. I should be walking." And the Prophet says, "No. And then he told him, "O Mu'adh, perhaps you will not see me after this, and perhaps you will come back to Medina, and you will find my masjid and my grave." So again, he is, and this is just a few months prior to this, and he's prepping him for that. I might be dead next time you come. And obviously, we've talked about the entire Hajjatul Wada, formally saying goodbye to the 100,000 Muslims that were there, or 100,000 plus Muslims there, right? And he said, look, I may not be here next year, so get all you want from me from this. And then some of the other things which we briefly touched on at the end of last week was we've talked about how the Prophet came back in Dhul Hijjah, and then Muharram of the New Year, which although it wasn't the New Year later on, it became the New Year in the time of Umar. And then Dhul Hijjah, Muharram, and then Safar. Towards the end of Safar, within the last week of Safar, it said, or sort of in sort of mid Safar, it said that the Prophet ﷺ went out to Uhud. So he left Medina and went out to Uhud, where the battle obviously happened, and then he performed a farewell prayer to the shaheed, to the martyrs at Uhud, basically saying goodbye to the people there that were buried. And then once he said that, he said that he went on to address the people on a pulpit, saying, I am to precede you, and I have been made a witness upon you. By Allah, you will meet me at the fountain very soon, at the Hawd, right? I have been given the keys of worldly treasures by Allah. I do not fear for you that you will turn to polytheism after me, but I do fear that the acquisition of worldly riches should entice you to strike one another's neck. So he's basically saying, that the people, that what he fears for the ummah is not that generally the ummah will go back into jahiliyyah or will go back to idol worshipping, but we will start chasing the worldly wealth, and because of chasing the worldly wealth, we then fight each other, we strike each other's neck. And that's what we see obviously is happening in the ummah, people vying and fighting and bringing other people down for the sake of worldly riches or fame or other things like that. That's where the struggle is. It's not about whether you believe in Allah or sort of pagan idols. So the fact that he went to Uhud and he made a dua for the shaheed at Uhud and said, you meet me at the fountain very soon. Again, it's an indication that the end is there, or that the Prophet ﷺ had an inkling that these were the final days. And then there's the really famous incident which happened literally a day or two before the Prophet ﷺ fell ill, his final illness. So it's one of the last days in Safar. It said that at midnight he went to the graveyard, Al-Baqi, the Baqi cemetery, and he took along with him, he woke up, so he went to bed, he woke up about midnight, he knocked on the door of one of his servants, Abu Muwayhiba, and told him to accompany him. And he said to Abu Muwayhiba that Jibreel has commanded me to go to Baqi now late at night. So they all so he gets ready, and again Prophet, and again the thing I love about this story is that he makes sure that he goes with someone, if there's a witness there, who can then report back to people this happened. And the Prophet obviously could have gone by himself, but he knew that it was important that these actions should not be done in isolation. Other people should be aware that this is what happened, and hence we get this narration from the servant. So he goes to Baqi, which obviously at the time, now because the Prophet's mosque has expanded so much, but at the time it was sort of outside the city limits. So the Prophet, he heads out to Baqi late at night, takes his servant, and he says to the people in the grave and said, "Peace be upon you, tomb dwellers or grave dwellers. May that morning the dawns upon you be more relieving than that which dawn upon the living." So that basically, may you have more peace than there is existing for the peace who are alive today. Afflictions are approaching them like cloudy lumps of a dark night, the last of which follows the first, and the last one bearing more evil than the first. And then he comforted the people of the grave by saying, "Soon we will follow you, we will follow you." So Abu Muwayhiba, he's just obviously standing there shocked, listening to what the Prophet is saying. And then on the way back, the Prophet he turns to Abu Muwayhiba and says, "Do you know Allah has given me the choice of the keys to this world and everlasting life, and then Jannah, or to meet Allah right now and be in Jannah?" So the choice is, Prophet can live in this world, and for as long as the world is around, till the end of the world, till the end of time, the Prophet can be alive until the end of time, and then he dies and he will be in Jannah. Or, that's choice one. Choice two is that he should meet Allah right now and be in Jannah. So these are the two choices, right? Whatever happens, obviously still gets to be in Jannah. Either does it now or delays it until the end of the world. So he would be alive for however many centuries that the world exists. So when the servant heard this, he said, "May my mother and my father be sacrificed for you, or be given in ransom for you, Ya Rasulullah. Choose this world for all of eternity and then Jannah." And obviously that's Abu Muwayhiba, he wants to stay with the Prophet. He doesn't want that to happen. And then the Prophet says, "No, I've already chosen. So you can't make me change my mind. I've already made my decision." Obviously, he didn't tell him the decision, but it's inferred. I've already made my decision. So again, the Abu Muwayhiba, he's hearing this, but he doesn't realize the immediacy of this, right? He's probably thinking that this could just be something that's going to happen in a few months or a few years' time. He was given this choice, and he's made his choice. He doesn't realize that literally within a day or two, Prophet will fall ill, and then within a couple of weeks, he will pass on to the next phase, right? So again, it's not that sort of hit home, and obviously later on when the Prophet was ill and he passes away, then these things hit home for people like Abu Muwayhiba, and he tells other people this is what happened. But the other thing that this shows us is the Prophet that the care he had for the people, for his people, even the people in the grave, the people who died, the people who had sacrificed their lives for the message, and the people who were close and dear to him, right? The people in Uhud, obviously people like Hamza ibn Abi Talib, right? Some of the dear people, he's having his last conversation with them. And again, it's an encouragement to us to regularly go to the graveyard and to make dua for the dead. And again, this is, perhaps is one of the wisdoms why Jibreel encouraged him to go to Baqi that night, right? So again, it reminds us of our own mortality, our own death, and again, it's a sunnah that we should all be acquainted with. So that was at the very end of the month of Safar. Then it said on sort of Monday the 29th of Safar, the end of the month, some of the reports are that he did a janazah in Baqi, in the cemetery. And then on his way back, he started with a little headache, right? And started with a slight fever, right? But he thought sort of nothing of it. But this was essentially his final illness. So it said that he then sort of led the prayers he still continued to lead the prayers for the Muslims despite being ill. And again, we need to realize that 1400 years ago, they didn't have access to medicines and therapeutics that we do. They didn't have paracetamol, they didn't have ibuprofen, they didn't have these things. They had at best a few sort of herbal remedies which weren't that effective. So if people were ill, they were genuinely ill. People had a toothache, it would be a really severe, debilitating event for them. If people had pain in the body or a severe fever or headache, it would be debilitating. They did not have access to a medicines cabinet to go take a couple of paracetamol or ibuprofen. Even though those things don't in of themselves work, it is Allah who gives the shifa through the medication. But at least we've got access to that medication through which Allah can give the shifa. They didn't even have that. So when people were, in those times, it's well recorded that people would suffer so much from the pain of a fever that the pain would essentially kill them, right? The methods for bringing people's temperature down, simply just pouring water on people, right? So they didn't have these easy access to a local pharmacy, if they were in pain and suffering. And so the Prophet's illness started, at the end of Safar, in the beginning of Rabiul Awwal. So the Prophet, despite this time, he would still be sort of rotating through all the through his different wives and spending time with each of the wives. But then when the fever got more significant, maybe on the 1st or the 2nd of Rabiul Awwal, it was his time to be in Maymuna's house, his wife Maymuna, and then he became very weak, and he found it difficult standing up. So he gathered all his wives around, and he asked permission from his wives to, basically he said, "Where shall I stay tomorrow? Where shall I stay?" And so the wives essentially understood what he meant by that, seeing his condition. And they've never seen the Prophet like this. He's always been strong. He's always been very strong amongst them, right? And for him to be weak and feverish and need support, they were also very worried about him. And so when the Prophet says, "Where should I stay? Where shall I stay tomorrow?" they understood that his preference would be to stay in the house of Aisha, which is next to the mosque. And again, they all, they all understood that. So then they all agreed that whilst he's ill, he can recuperate and rest in the house of Aisha. So they moved his things there, and because he was so weak, they said that Al-Fadl bin Al-Abbas, Al-Abbas's other son, Al-Fadl, we talked about him converting to Islam a while ago, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, because they are, the household of the Prophet, they are, Ahlul Bayt. They put a bandage tightly around the Prophet's head because he's complaining of a headache, and then they dragged him to his feet, and they're both holding him, and they're walking him to Aisha's house from Maymuna's house. And basically, that's where the Prophet spends the rest of his life, the last week of his life, in the house of Aisha. He's taken there by Al-Fadl and Ali ibn Abi Talib. And it's said that she would, once he's there, she would recite the last two chapters of the Qur'an. This is part of the Ruqyah chapters 113 and 114, and then things that that the Prophet ﷺ had taught her and taught the other to do when people are ill. So and the Prophet ﷺ said that fever is one of the punishments of Jahannam in this world. So when you have a big fever, it's or severe fever rather, the Prophet ﷺ is trying to indicate you're feeling hot and burning up inside. It's akin to some of the punishments of Jahannam in this world. And again, it's just used as a reminder for us when we are ill and suffering, that this is not even a fraction of the suffering that we could be having if we are in Jahannam. And again, excuse me, it's about turning to Allah and seeking shifa and support from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he's sick in the house of Aisha, and then she would recite Surah Al-Falaq, Surah Al-Nasr, and blow on the Prophet ﷺ, and she would blow into his hands and then use his hands to wipe over his face. So rather than doing it, so she would do the reciting and blow into the Prophet ﷺ's hands, and then use his hands, because his hands are obviously more blessed, to wipe over his body. There would be a bucket next to the Prophet ﷺ's bed, and then when he's getting particularly hot, she would pour the water onto him. And then obviously when his headache sort of kicks in even more, he would say, "Oh my head, oh my head." And so then she would tie the turban on very tightly, and then also douse him with water. And so sort of the one of the sort of final stories that we'll do, and then we'll pick up from this next time, inshallah. There's one occasion again which just shows the relationship between the Prophet ﷺ and Aisha radiallahu anha at the time. So she's starting to she gets a headache as well, for whatever reason. She's getting headache. The Prophet is ill with a headache, but she gets a headache, and she goes, "Oh, my head, my head." And the Prophet he sort of smiled and he said, "No, rather, Aisha, my pain, my pain." And then there's those sort of toing and froing, teasing each other between them, and he's sort of trying to pacify Aisha and distract her from her pain. And then he says, even though the Prophet is suffering severely, he goes, "Oh, Aisha, what do you lose if you were to die right now?" Because she's complaining that her pain is so severe, she's going to die, and this is going to be the end of her. And he goes, "Well, what do you lose if you're going to die right now? I'm still alive, and wouldn't you be blessed that I will wash your body? That's an honor, and that I will put you in your grave, and that I will pray over you. What better things are there?" And the Prophet was just doing this just to sort of pacify her, and distract her. He said, "Look, what if you were to die, and you're sort of wailing and complaining that your headache is severe, you're going to die? So that shouldn't be a problem, because I'm going to be around. I will wash your body. I'll put you in the grave, and I will pray over you. What more blessings could you want?" Right? So then she retorts back saying, "Yeah, I'm sure that's what you're waiting for, Ya Rasulullah, because then you can go to your otherwise, and no one will keep a check on you." So again, you can see there's a bit of the banter between the two, where they're sort of just trying to sort of joke with each other. So yeah, you're just waiting to get rid of me, and that's your game, isn't it? So you can go off and do your other things, right? And then sort of on another occasion, sort of the I'll finish here, inshallah. The pain gets so severe that the Prophet he faints, right? And so when he comes around, he says, "Pour out me from the 7 qirab, the 7 water skin pots of the various wells, so that I can go out and meet the people and talk to them." So they sat the Prophet in a container that they usually use for washing, like a sort of a big bathtub, and they got these. They went to get these buckets of water from a particular well, or some said from some different wells that was known for cool water, and then cool, beautiful water, and then they would bring it back. And the process, he's in this container. They poured the water on him and kept pouring it on him from these 7 water skin pots. And then the Prophet said, that's enough. And then they tied a bandage around him. And then, because obviously his, not just the fever, but he's still got the headache and it's throbbing, tied the bandage tightly. And again, sometimes we do this when we have pain, when we have our own headaches, we can sometimes tie something around our head. And then he asked Abbas and Ali to take him so he can talk to the people. And so, again, he's so weak, he can't even walk by himself. And then he addresses the people. And inshallah, next time we'll talk about what the Prophet says in his sort of final sort of addresses to the people. Because obviously the people are getting really worried and anxious because the Prophet, he just basically prays and then he goes back and he's not seen, and he's not chatting to the people, he's not conversing with the people, he's not having his halakha with the people. He just comes, prays, and goes back. And so obviously rumors start to spread, and so the mosque is slowly packing with people, and people are beginning to basically camp inside the masjid because they're getting worried, and they the Prophet is ill or is sick, right? And so we'll talk inshallah next time about some of the last things that the Prophet says to the Ummah, inshallah. So until then, do remember us in your du'as. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم.